Can we get another round of applause for this amazing film? First of all, I just want to thank you both for creating and writing, for producing such a powerful intervention. I was honored to sit with you for an interview. I don't know how many years ago that was now. But to watch it turn into this is a testament to your talent and your vision, and really your principal commitment to helping us heal as a community. So I'm just grateful for it. Talk to me about why this was your direction. You went from Beyond Beats versus Bullock Junkies. Some people you could have moved in a lot of directions for your why here.
Well, first of all, it's good to see you. I don't think I've seen you in the flesh since that interview, I believe. Many years ago, yeah. And I also want to give thanks for the grounding exercises that took place before and afterward. I want to thank everyone for participating in that. I tend to select projects that are deeply personal on some level, that have a real personal connection to. So with Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes, my personal love for hip hop culture, but then also my passion for talking about issues around masculinity and misogyny and sexism and all of the issues, gender violence, all of the things that film deals with. Soulful Junkies is deeply personal because I was grieving the loss of my father, during that time, and really trying to reconcile what led to his illness, and then looking at what led to his illness from a much broader perspective and how we as Black people are dealing with multiple preventative illnesses for a number of reasons. And so that's why I chose that topic. But with this one, I wanted to get back to, really deconstructing masculinity, and I thought that hazing was one of those areas that was really left untouched. When they're having films that deal with hazing culture, but it doesn't really get into the nuances, the differences along racial lines, between different gender groups, and all these different spaces. And it was also the film that made me most nervous. It was the one that I thought I had the most to risk by telling this story. And it's a story that made my hands sweaty when I thought about the possibility of making a film about this topic.
I appreciate your vulnerability in the film about that. At various points, you talk about what it means to be an insider, exposing secrets, exposing ritual. Not at the level of like esoteric stuff, but at the level of saying this is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is why we shouldn't do it anymore. You were afraid of it. Talk to me a little bit what you were afraid of losing.
Before we go too much further, I want to acknowledge my producer here, Natalie.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge her because Natalie and along with my editor, Leslie Salas, is here somewhere. I wanted her to be up here on the stage. I wanted her to come down and be a part of this Q&A because, as an editor, she played a tremendous role in telling and shaping this story. I wish that she was on the stage here to be able to talk. And also Denise Green was the original producer for this film before we ran out of money. And then she also kind of saved us in her role at Black Public Media, funding us and giving us more money. So I just want to acknowledge all of the people in this room who helped this become a reality.
Yeah,
so I just want
to do that. Gotta shout for people out here.
I forgot your question.
What were you afraid of losing?
Yeah. Friendships. I was afraid of losing standing, within the Black Greek letter community, the Divine Nine. Because I was dealing with something that was clearly a taboo subject. I remember going to a cookout, for our centennial. It was in Philadelphia. And I was walking, through to get to the backyard of my frat brother's homes. And, I had announced that I was making this film. Everyone around me knew I was making this film. And before I could even get to the backyard, he grabbed me. This was older brother. He was like, he was probably in the 70s. And he put his arm around me and he told me, he was like, people are not going to understand this. He was like, if you talk about this, don't talk about these number of things. Don't talk about this, don't talk about that. He said, nobody's going to understand what we do and why we do it. I had another record, come up to me and approach me at a frat event. He said, I rock with you for hip hop beyond beats and rhymes. I rock with you for soulful junkies. I ain't rocking with you on this one. Wow. Told me that straight up to my face. I'm not rocking with you on this one.
So I can give up the homophobia, I can let go of the fried chicken.
Yeah, but I can't let go of
I remember some bad.
Yeah, exactly. And he told me, he said, this is an internal issue that's supposed to be discussed in-house. And I'll never forget that day. And this is a very prominent brother who said this to me. So, there's just everything that Dr. Ricky Jones talked about in terms of like that social death. That I was probably most concerned about. But actually, to be honest with you, now that the film is out, we premiered at Tribeca, I feel liberated. Like the way I feel right now is I feel liberated.
Now, let me ask you, this film could have easily been a film about hazing within Black Greek organizations. And there's lots of that stuff. There's both dramatic projects we've seen. We've also seen documentaries and exposés on the news about it. But this film goes much broader. Why was that important to capture the story? Maybe a Black filmmaker. Why was it important to capture the story of what goes on at a white fraternity or what goes on even in bands? So why was the story better for you all telling it more broadly?
Well, I'm really going to give you what Byron has been saying for years. And that is that he did not want this to be a film about Black pathology. He did not want, people to look at this and feel like, oh, there go those N-words, being violent and hurting each other and what have you. And, if you remember, in the film, we give a statistic, which is that 83% of hazing deaths are actually not in Black Greek-led organizations. They're in white fraternities. So it was important to make that distinction, but it was also important to kind of take the focus off of young people who are who are on college campuses, in fraternities and sororities, and help, hopefully, a general public to understand that this is something that we find throughout our culture. Hazing is not just a young people's problem, because everyone wants to belong. So, so much didn't get into the film, but we read about, hazing in the White House. We read about hazing, in the nursing profession, the broader medical profession, and on Wall Street. And it's all over the place. So it's really trying to make the point that because we are human beings and because we have this need to belong, hazing is about all of us. It's not about one little group. It's about all of us. So it takes all of us to be able to solve it.
One of the challenges we see, a lot of this is alluded to in film, but they've been directly spoken to in the case of some of these universities, which like Penn State, for example, is people throw their hands up and say, it's not on us. Everybody kind of passes the buck. The university says, well, look, if they're keeping it a secret, we can't stop it. The fraternity say, well, we banned it, we have a zero tolerance policy, but now there's some kid's basement, 10 blocks away, we can't regulate it properly. How do we get from the kind of blame game, passing the buck moment to one where we actually solve the problem? Is it solvable? That's for both of y'all.
Well, I think it hasn't been solved yet, right? It's been going on for centuries, and it hasn't been solved yet. I think that, I'm a really big proponent of prevention and education. I think that's really important. I think it has to come from the top down and from the bottom up. I think
what is the top though? Is the top the institution? Is it black men? Is it schools? Is it who is the top?
Leaders of organizations, leaders within organizations. I mean, you know, Marc. I mean, there are hierarchies within all of these organizations, right? You know, from the national level, from the chapter level, district level, then chapter level. You know, individual college level. You know, graduate chapters, and most of us have similar structures. You know, I personally believe. I mean, I hope that this film is shown, you know, at high schools and colleges all over the country, so that people can, you know, really talk about this culture, really get underneath it. You know, one of the reasons why, you know, I chose to tell my own personal story is because of that history of silence where we don't talk about it. So I wanted me breaking the silence to give other people permission, you know, to talk about their own personal experience, their own stories, because I think, you know, there are a lot of people who are guarded. They don't want to tell or share their stories publicly because it is so taboo, right? So,
and you take an oath not to.
And you take an oath not to, you know. And to be really quite honest with you, you know, Jessica, my editor, will you know, will say this. Natalie will tell you. Denise will tell you. I was very, very, very concerned about crossing that line. Like, when was I crossing that line of divulging too much of my story? You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, you have to. I don't think that I did. You know what I'm saying? But you gotta, you know, talk to other people. I mean, some people may think that I did cross the line. You know, but I will tell you that since this film premiered at Tribeca in June, I've had a number of people reach out to me who are in Greek-led organizations and fraternities, and people who got hazed in all kinds of spaces reach out to me personally and share with me their personal story, talk about how happy, you know, they are that this film, that I made the film in the way that we made it. So I think there's something about sharing storytelling that gives people permission to talk, you know, and I hope that this film will break that silence down just a little bit, chip away at it. But I think ultimately it's really about cultural transformation, education, awareness, shifting the culture. I don't want to be too prescriptive in terms of like how that should be done, because I think young people are extremely creative and can do it. But I think it's really about changing traditions, right? Adopting new traditions, right? Creating new norms, you know, that don't really rely on injuring or hurting someone, you know, in order for someone to feel like they're a valued member of that organization or group.
I agree, by the way. I know the film, like, that's the context I was saying. I think people should go through something. I don't think that something has to be violent, though. There was a time where I would have said yes, to be clear. I mean, I absolutely would have been. But over time, I've come to believe that we can have rites, passages, and rituals that don't require us to beat each other and harm each other physically. I'm not sure what that looks like either, in terms of as a prescriptive level, but I'm sure that there's something that we can give people that's meaningful. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that you all kind of went into a little bit investigative mode, which I appreciate, trying to help get some sense of resolution and closure for people who lost their children. In California, you got the AKA Ritual Ocean, you know, there is multiple incidents where there needed to be closure, there needed to be investigation, there needed to be a line sister or a soror saying, okay, here's what actually happened, here's why you lost your child. At the end, you all say, you know, we reached out, they tried. What was that like, trying to reach out to folks, trying to get closure? How central of an aim was that for you all?
It was really challenging, because there's a code of silence. So just trying to get people to respond in the first place was, you know, most people just did not. And we really did try and reach out to, particularly in the case of Robert Champion and Kristen and Kanika, we reached out multiple times on Facebook, Instagram, by email, called, nothing. And I guess it's to be expected, but we did want to try and give people an opportunity because, you know, people evolve, they change over time. Maybe someone came to, you know, the point where they felt like, yeah, it is time for me to say what happened. And so we were hoping that they would share that with us. But yeah, it was very, very challenging. In the one instance where we were able to get in touch with someone who was there when one of the hazing victims was killed, at the point that they realized there was not going to be a payoff. They wouldn't answer our calls, they stopped responding to texts. So, you know, there is that element as well. But yeah, it's really, really hard. And even now, you know, I worry that maybe we didn't do enough. You know, maybe we didn't reach out an extra time where maybe someone would have responded.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer because Natalie was the person. When she was, you did a lot of reaching out. I did some. The person that she was referred to, and I think she put a comment. I mean, he literally asked me, you know, will I get paid for this? And once I told him there was no compensation, you know, for this, you know, this particular role that he would be playing, I never heard back from him. But he was there at the scene, you know, when Robert Champion was killed, and you know, he refused to participate. But there were other people who they wanted their identities concealed, you know, who eventually did not make it into the film. We have one person pull out, you know, who was included in the film at one point, and then, you know, she conferred with her sorority sisters, and they came to the decision that this would not be a good look for their sorority, and so she respectfully requested to be removed from the film. And that was pretty far down the line for us. So we had to, you know, we had to figure out a way to kind of tell that perspective. We had to find someone else who was willing. So it was really hard. Really hard.
What did you learn?
You know, I learned a lot about myself, man. To be honest with you, I mean, I just learned, I've grown tremendously. I've evolved a lot. I'm not the same person today when I first started working on this film. And this film took us 10 years to make. You know, from the moment that I announced that I was making this film, took 10 years. So I'm not the same person today that I was when I started. I have a tremendous amount of empathy and compassion for families. Like, I think the biggest thing that I learned, Marc, is that when you hear a hazing story, you hear somebody dies, right? Or someone, you know, is seriously injured. And these cases are still happening, right? I mean, they're happening, like, constantly. It really makes me, I understand now that these are real lives that are affected, real families that are affected forever, right? You know, one of the things that Pastor Pat said, you know, during one of our interviews, she said that hazing death is forever. It's forever. It's very powerful, you know, and so, you know, while I had some fear and trepidation about making this film, at this point, I know what side I stand on. You know, I stand on the side of victims and survivors and their families, you know, and I'm very clear about that.